Very interesting. So as democracies have grown in size and have become more diverse, I mean, I know there's the whole politicization around the issue of diversity, but diversity is also just a fact of modern democracies. Most of them are extremely ethnically diverse. To me, it seems like our core challenge, if we're going to sort of find productive and healthy ways to coexist, and there's a question I have for you, what's your view on this, is how do we articulate and promote shared moral norms when we can't necessarily default to homogenous in-group identities, and when values between these different groups may clash at multiple levels? What's the best, or what are some of the ways? I mean, you've got the mass gatherings as an example. You've got playing up the exhausted majority that's implied by the Hidden Tribes study. I wonder what what your view is on this challenge that we have in modern democracies, and how do we articulate and find and promote shared moral norms in an extremely diverse, technologically rapid, fragmented, high cognitive load society? Because I mean, these are the features of our societies, and it doesn't seem likely that it's gonna change anytime soon. It might even these characteristics may even accentuate, and will likely accentuate in the coming years and decades.
Yeah. I love this question. And it's something that I've been thinking a lot about recently, actually. So here's what I would say. I think that what we need to do is we need to recover a better language and a better way of talking about some of these moral norms that you're referencing here. What we need to do is we need to reinvigorate the conversation about what the social contract actually looks like. And what is the social contract? A social contract is an agreement among citizens to accept certain responsibilities in exchange for certain rights. So I agree to abide by certain principles and obligations in return for certain privileges and opportunities that I'm given by the government. And I think right now our conversation about the nature of the social contract is really impoverished. You know, we're so focused on these hot button political, controversial, polarizing issues that we're really neglecting the opportunity to have a deeper conversation about what our responsibilities and moral obligations are to each other in the 21st century. And I'll linger for just an additional moment on this idea of responsibility. So personal responsibility is, you know, when we think about it, it's well known to be sort of a very controversial and polarizing idea. We talk about personal responsibility. We often talk about it in the context of lifting yourself up by the bootstraps and sort of taking control of your situation. And that is often equated with a sort of a victim blaming or problematic view from people on the political left, because it sounds as though, and it has historically been used to say, to blame people for their situations. But the reality is that when you look at the data, social science shows us that having a sense of agency and responsibility is crucial for living a meaningful and purposeful life. People need to feel some sort of sense of responsibility or agency in order to do that. So we can't fully reject this idea of responsibility. The question can't just be, is there responsibility or is there not? It needs to be, what are our responsibilities? And I think that too much of the time we focus so much on, you know, this idea of certain types of responsibilities to the exclusion of others. Our responsibilities come from our the relationships and roles that we occupy in society. So I have responsibilities as a parent. I have responsibilities as a romantic partner. I have responsibilities as a friend. I have responsibilities as a neighbor, as a citizen, as a member of a community. I even maybe even have certain responsibilities as a consumer of information or as a user of technology or as a human being. And so we occupy, I think human beings occupy this very kind of interconnected set of roles and relationships that define the lives that we have. And our responsibilities come from those particular roles that we embody. And so by acknowledging that fact, I think that what we have an opportunity to do is to invigorate and spark a healthier conversation about what our responsibilities actually are. And once we acknowledge the importance of responsibility in this much more sort of apolitical way, in a more sort of moral way, in the sense of a moral fabric, not even a political fabric, but like, how do we build a flourishing society and a flourishing community? When we talk about it that way, we extricate this idea of responsibility from this very polarizing political environment, and we talk about it in the sense of in a deeper way about how do we live meaningful and contributing lives to society. I think that when we recapture that way of approaching the notion of responsibility, then I think it opens the door to a healthier public discourse about these deep issues that we're facing in society, and could potentially help to create a platform that will allow us to relate to each other in a healthier and more productive way.
That's a really powerful message, because something that does bring together both extreme groups and the polarization discussion that we have today is this idea that there's something fundamentally wrong with society or with a process inside of society, and now we need to come in and rectify it, or we need to come in and fix the injustice, or fix this, or start demanding things, demanding change, as opposed to the emphasis on what our responsibilities to our collectives should be. And like you very, very rightly said, our responsibilities are kind of commensurate with our own individual situations. So you have responsibilities towards your family, towards your friends, towards your community, towards your nation, towards, I mean, you could kind of look at the concentric circles outward.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, I almost feel like you've probably heard of this expression in social sciences, the tragedy of the commons, right? Where you've got a limited number of fish in a pond, let's say. And so for every individual fisherman, it makes more sense for them to sort of take more fish, but for the collective as a whole, it'll leave the livestock depleted. So there's a tragedy of the commons when everybody follows their self-interest. I feel like if we emphasize responsibility, it's almost the opposite of that. It would be I don't know how we could put it, a benefit to the commons, in that if we all contributed just whatever we could from a spirit of responsibility and contribution, it may feel individually like I'm sacrificing a little bit of my self-interest right now, but overall, over lengthier periods of time, we're likely to everybody, all of us, benefit. And there could be kind of like a renewal of the commons, as opposed to, I feel like what we're doing now is just pulling and pulling and pulling and demanding and taking and trying to hijack the other group and trying to take power and trying to, right? And the more we're engaged in that dynamic, the more we kind of construe the goal as absolute, total, utter victory over the other group, and like eradication of the other group and stripping away all of their power and privileges. And it just doesn't, I think part of that game is going to be obviously there in a democratic society. In a free market society, you're going to have competition. But if we can sort of marry competition with a broader sense of responsibility, I think we'd have some reason to be more optimistic than a lot of us are today.
Yeah, I love that. I love the renewal of the commons. I think that's great.
Renewal of the commons.
Yeah, that was nice. Nicely put. And I couldn't agree more.